So, and if you lose your train of thought anywhere, just take a nice big pause. It's easier for me to chop it out.
Mm-hmm.
And if you say anything, or if it goes into a thing you don't want to talk about, just say, I don't want to talk about that, and I'll chop it out as well. It's
that works.
Problem. All right? And in that case, and then I do, from what you had sent me about, like, why do girls get into the industry in the first place, and the trafficking stuff. I think following on from that is a good segue. I think. So.
Yeah.
All right. Then we'll begin. Oh, and Adrienne Spring, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. I haven't called you that in a while.
Right.
And I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name and butcher the shit out of that. So.
Right.
We do me and him do an MMA show every week. And god damn, it's like 9/10 of the fucking roster come out of somewhere in Europe now.
Yeah.
Consonants are just loaded together with like 4 vowels suddenly pop up. You're like, I don't know how to say this.
Well, most of it, like, it tends to be sort of, as my mom would say, SZ is esh.
Yeah.
So it's the pronunciation of a lot of things in European language. It tends to be like the sound is more phonetic versus technical, versus in North American pronunciation, everything is very different.
You just look and see 17 letters in a name, you're like, that's Smith. It's fine.
Pretty much. Yeah, no kidding. Mm-hmm.
All right. It's the first one of the day. Mm-hmm. Welcome to Town Hall on 88.7 The River, local radio at its best. I'm Chris, filling in for Mr. Calder this week, and I am joined by Adrienne Spring for the second time. Welcome back, Adrienne.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming back in and joining us. Mm-hmm. If you missed our chat back in October of last year, Adrienne is an exotic dancer, stripper, working in the adult entertainment industry. We had a great chat last time about how you got into the industry yourself, why you'd gotten into it, and your jobs previously, working industrial, working in the retail sector as well. So you've really run the gambit of work and the kinds of jobs people can have.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was such an interesting dichotomy for somebody to have been in the regular blue-collar world to go out and get a job that traditionally you don't go from this one sector into that sector. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, welcome back. Tell us about what your adventures have been like since the last time you were here.
Basically, traveled, went home for a bit, for like a minute. Headed off to Europe, basically. I never been to the Christmas markets in Germany, which was awesome. A friend of mine sort of was like, hey, let's do this. So, we planned that out. I love going to Europe. It's sort of a holiday, trip for me to kind of decompress and, really sort of, just, get out of my kind of work headspace, which is nice.
The last time you were here, it was in October, and at that there was a certain point you were planning on coming back to this region around Christmas time-ish. Mm-hmm. And then that ended up falling through. Mm-hmm. And we were talking at the time that's not, what's the word? Not an unusual circumstance to have happened, that you couldn't get a booking in the place you had intended to go to. Mm-hmm. What, your work it's almost like you're an independent contractor.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we are.
Explain that for people, because I think there's a lot of misconception on how clubs work in general. Mm-hmm. I spent a lot of years, I thought that girls were hired by the club and you work there full time, but that's not the case, right? Or at least not now.
Right. It's kind of tricky because I think it depends on which country you're in, which province you're in. It also depends on the clubs. It varies quite a bit. Like, I'm not like a house girl with anybody. So I can basically, part of the reason that I like traveling, all over the place is because I can travel all over the place. I also, like to see different places I've never been, meet people I've never met. I don't have any sort of ties to direct locations or whatever. So it gives a lot of freedom, but at the same time, there's no guarantee. So I can, be booked in a certain location and then, whatever, scheduling conflict, or somebody else is coming in or whatever, and then it's like, no, sorry, we can't do this length of time. You're going to be here for like this length of time. So that's just pretty much what happens. It's kind of it adds to the stress factor, but it is part of the what it is. So it's nothing's guaranteed, basically.
How do you deal with that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you try to schedule as much as you can, as far in advance as possible?
I try to. No, it's back in, the pandemic basically screwed a lot of that up, because, back in the day there was more locations to work. There's more sort of guaranteed locations to work. Now it's kind of like, you may or may not, the part of the issue that I was going, sort of panicking over the weekend is because I was booking sort of travel. I originally intended to go to Alberta because I'm going to be there sort of next month. I was originally intending for that to happen sooner, but that didn't really work out, because when I looked at the transportation costs, they were just too high. So I'm kind of like, I can't justify, bleeding out both ends to try to get from A to B, and it's just, it just doesn't work. And then also the Flair Airlines seem to have gone sort of belly up in segments. So apparently their certain routes have been canceled and certain planes got taken out of service. So basically, anybody that's sort of booked with this company is screwed. So basically that impacts like travel sort of security, I guess. Because I also worked when the Greyhound company was going out of business, and this is basically the same issue, is that they would have routes that got pulled. Like, you'd have a ticket for whatever route, and then they'd be just, sorry, can't do this one, yank it, and then everybody who bought a ticket was high and dry. So this is no difference, basically. And because, like, unlike Greyhound, who was a larger company, like, it depends on, like, it was Canada-wide versus, the Flair Air is also Canada-wide, but they're kind of like the sort of cheapest option, which is why I was using them, because I, don't want to, I have no reason to spend an arm and a leg on something.
Sure.
So I try to kind of be as economic as possible. But it's difficult. It's not easy anymore.
So you really noticed, though, a drop-off in clubs?
Oh yeah.
Today versus pre-pandemic era?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that partially different city councils have put pressure on certain clubs to either shut down, or they've simply changed, what do you call it? They've changed, what's the wording? Like zoning, like, or whatever.
Bylaws? Yeah,
bylaws, that stuff. Religious groups are seemingly sort of getting a bit more vocal about a lot of stuff, which is a whole other topic. And our industry basically gets, once again, it gets shafted for a lot of stuff. This has not like a new phenomenon. It's basically happened, ad infinitum, back, in Europe, North America, whatever, cross continent, basically. So it's not an unusual thing, but it just sort of comes in waves depending on when the economic crunch happens. Then, we're kind of like shafted. And then when economic sort of prosperity happens, then, oh yes, there's a more surge in, adult industry sort of work.
Did you find a drop-off in workers? Like, were there less girls willing to do work because of the pandemic or through that? Or is it, is that about the same?
Well, that basically shut us out completely. Like, that's part of the reason why I got into industrial work. That's part of why I got into tiling.
But you couldn't be at a club, so
right. Basically, yeah. The clubs were shut down because we were not considered an essential service, even though, ironically enough, a lot of audience members were struggling with depression. Suicide became an increasing issue in both audience members and also performers. We lost a few of our members, and it's something that across the board basically was like with blue collar workers, a lot of those workers are essential. Like, it doesn't matter what's going on, those jobs are going to stay open, period. And so I was like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do the job that is not gonna get shut down. So that's what I got into.
I guess what I was wondering is if did a lot of girls not come back to the industry at the end of the pandemic because there were less clubs? Or did you end up with just a proliferation of, well, geez, we all came back, we all wanted to do it again, but now there's less places to do it, which obviously puts more of a crush on all of you individually, right?
I think, well, that's interesting actually, because I think it depends on where the person is or persons
Sure.
are in their life. Like a lot of them, not a lot of them, but a number of them, were in relationships and we're like, okay, fine, screw this. I'm gonna, have a baby, move to the next, move out of province, out of country, out of state, whatever. So people evolve. And so I think a lot of people, quit the business, decided screw this, the stress is a lot, so they're going to move into another industry, or they just took up schooling, because they wanted something that was more stable, more reliable, and then sort of went in that direction. So it basically depends, I think, on the person.
So we talked, when you're having the scheduling issues that come up around Christmas and the New Year, you talked then about looking at padding out a resume that was a non-entertainment style resume to find something a little more reliable, a little more scheduling.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, basically the thing is that it's like I've done this job for like a long time. And what's interesting actually, and this is actually, this was explored to an extent, but it's rarely mentioned in the movie Hustlers with Jennifer Lopez. You can see a lot of the people in that movie, they were trying to get, civilian work. And, you go to the interview and then they're kind of like, oh, you have this sort of block of time when you're not, doing anything. What were you doing? And the thing is, in this, both fantasy, even though that was based off, sort of stories that did happen, and reality is that, our industry doesn't look good on a resume, even though we're basically, we're used to dealing with people in like a military level stress environments. So it's like we're very good organizers. We're very good, high pressure dealing with audience members, customers, whatever you want to call them. We can deal with people in all sort of aspects of, everything, being like goal focused,
Sure.
Entertaining, management, business management,
Time management.
right? Time management, there's kind of like the joke of like stripper 5 minutes versus civilian 5 minutes. If 5 minutes for a stripper, like you can basically do anything, like when you're late or whatever, you didn't get into your work on time and you have a scheduled show, the joke is like, you get out of your civilian clothing, jump into your outfit, and it's like, time to do your hair, time to do your face, just boom, just kind of this warp speed. Like it, and yet it doesn't, it's not an accepted sort of resume thing. And so, yeah, like I do find the reliability of this industry is now gone. Like it doesn't really exist anymore, because, economic, when you look at, back in the day when I started in BC, mining, forestry, canning, fishing, pulp mills, like that was a huge thing. Like when you go to Alberta, a lot of it was the oil industry. When you go to, I was in Newfoundland and the fishing industry, like crabbing and, whatever, like that was a huge part of the economy. And like when I was working in BC, like a lot of the pulp mills got shut down, McMillan Bloedel got shut down. A lot of the Greenpeace and whatever environmental groups, a lot of them, they protest, they shut down, and, with the pipelines in Alberta, a lot of the pipeline sort of industry got crippled, basically. The barrel, X amount of dollars per barrel, got decimated. So it's like they're maintaining pipes, but they're not really setting new stuff up. And it was interesting actually because a lot of the what people were complaining about in Vancouver, ironically enough, about the Site C Dam, which was this big sort of hydroelectric dam in sort of northern BC. People were protesting it, and we're like, oh, we don't want to have this here, oh, we don't want to have it, oh, ecological damage, not realizing that it doesn't matter what you're saying, it's already being built, like it's already getting done. So and the thing with that is that it's like, people complain about the damage that these dams do, but it's like you're yet using increasing amount of electricity. Where do you expect it's going to come from?
Yeah.
Like, if you don't want the damage of, either mining or oil or, fishery or whatever, don't consume the product. Don't,
chicken and the eggs.
Right? Like, don't complain about corporate existence, because you are the reason it exists. Like, if people didn't, go to Walmart, you wouldn't have, Walmart wouldn't exist if you supported your neighbor, making the cake, making your wedding dress, whatever. Like, it wouldn't exist. But now I'm totally like, what the heck was the original question?
I'll put you back to the resume. How do you deal with that frustration though, if you're in a job interview with somebody and they're talking about a resume gap between civilian style jobs?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that double standard?
That's, I guess, when a lot of people get super creative. It's like you literally turn into like an English professor. Managerial skills, or like, corporate events, stuff like that. So it literally sort of, you begin, euphemizing everything pretty much, because technically you did it. It's just not necessarily in that phrasing, so it basically just depends on, I guess, how successful somebody was at doing whatever they were doing, then it's like, oh yes, you can take the sort of structure of this and then slap it into a different sort of phrasing. Pretty much.
Do you see a day or a time coming where that stigma, for lack of a better term, isn't there?
I don't think so. That's a whole other discussion. Well, actually, that is the discussion. I don't know. That's something that, because the thing is that when you look at the entire spectrum of adult industry work, it's existed for millennia. So it's like nothing's changed. We just, call it different labels. We just like to pretend that, oh, it's new. Oh, we can eliminate it, eradicate it, whatever. Prohibition doesn't exist.
See, I find it's such a stereotype-based thing. And there is so much stigma and so many stereotypes held around it. But I wonder if that's because the industry doesn't get a chance to participate in the mainstream outside of here's a strip club in a movie, for example, or here is a dancer dancing. It's not enough conversations like this to kind of show maybe the stereotypes aren't the reality, right? Do you think that plays into it at all, or am I overreaching?
I think part of the problem is that, I'm an anomaly, doing these interviews, because a lot of people don't necessarily like to talk about it. I guess also because I am sort of atypical outside of the sort of stereotype. I guess because also people don't want the reality. They don't want to deal with the reality of basically anything. People don't want to take accountability, culpability, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter what it is with regarding to consumer of product, with regarding to, like, let's talk about Star Wars. People were, when they bullied, with the prequels, they bullied the young actor who played the young Anakin Skywalker. They literally bullied him into like a mental institution. Like he had a breakdown because of the amount of pressure that he was getting. And it's like, the public doesn't, I guess, not so much, like there's a difference between when you're online, yapping about something versus when you speak to somebody in person.
Sure. And
they can punch you out. Right? Like I've, had instances online where somebody's been a mouthy little snot, and yet if I was face to face with them, because I'm not exactly a small person, I could intimidate the shit out of them and they wouldn't open their mouth again. Like they would learn, like, the sort of, one thing I find interesting about, discipline in clubs is that when a dancer, KOs a guy or whatever, smacks him up or, punches him out or whatever. And when the dancer gets reprimanded, oh my God, you did this to the customer. And the question is, well, did he deserve it? Did he grab her, inappropriately? Like, I've been smacked in the bum so often, it's not even funny. I guess because it's not exactly, a flat butt. But it's like, come on, man. Like, does it have a sign that says spank me on it? Like, this is not Alice in Wonderland. It doesn't says, drink me, what is it? I can't remember. I didn't really watch the movie, or read the book. But it's like, drink me, the getting bigger, smaller, taller, shorter. There's no sign that says, spank this. Like, come on, what are you doing? But it's when, and I think also a lot of the problem is that a lot of these film industry groups don't, they part of the problem is when you have lacking discipline in civilian population, because when people are not held accountable for their actions, they're just going to keep going. Like, unless somebody was an asshole at one point, and I think somebody that I knew like throat punched a guy. Like, he never did that again, you can guarantee it. Like, he ever he basically got disciplined, period. How many parents discipline their kids? Mm-hmm. Self-discipline, bullshit. That doesn't really work. Like in schools, when you get kids that are unbelievably mouthy to the teachers, like, hello, I was never allowed to do that as a kid, and then you get a lot of younger generation people now, it's like they're out of control. Like, their attitude is just obnoxious and entitled and like, holy crap. Like, yes, I'm an adult industry worker, but it's like, do I have to be your mother? Like, like, I'll spank you more than your mother ever did, trust me. But, the thing is that they're undisciplined before they get into our establishment. Sure. And it's something else to, have to deal with that.
We're going to wrap up our first segment. We're going to take a break, and we'll bring you back in. Say that over again. We're going to wrap up our first segment. We're out of time. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back for... Oh, Jesus Christ. I only do this show once every few months, so... We're out of time for segment... No.
And rolling!
Blooper reel.
That's why I'm not hitting the off button.
We're out of time for segment 1. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with Adrienne Spring in a few minutes. Oh, that sounds terrible. We're out of time for segment 1. We'll be back with Adrienne Spring after the break. Stick with us on Town Hall.